Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Keipert Labs. In today's video we're going to be discussing combustion and respiration. Two examples of common everyday chemical reactions that on first glance look quite similar and do have some common features but also share some differences. So we're going to start by having a look at what we mean by combustion, what we mean by respiration, and then we're going to take some time to compare these things side by side and see the ways in which they are similar and different. So what do we mean by combustion? Okay, so combustion is the name essentially for what we describe as a burning reaction. You know, we're burning a candle, we're burning, lighting oil in a spirit burner, we're burning natural gas, we're burning propane to light a barbecue, or in kind of a gas heater. That's ultimately the chemical reaction we're talking about as combustion. The way we're going to define it, the kind of working definition we're going to say is a rapid reaction of carbon compounds with oxygen. Now, we can, just as a quick point before we move on, that we can often talk about combustion of things that don't contain carbon. Sometimes we kind of use that term a little carelessly, but we're going to kind of restrict ourselves to this today because compounds containing carbon are the ones that are in common between these two chemical reactions, and it's good for us to be able to see that. So some of the kinds of carbon compounds we're talking about are things called hydrocarbons. So they're compounds made up of predominantly carbon and hydrogen atoms, so things like methane, things like glucose, propane, octane in your car engine. They're all examples of hydrocarbons. Now there's lots and lots and lots of compounds that fit within this family we call hydrocarbons, but they tend to react in very similar ways, certainly in this kind of area. And so that's partly why we're going to do that. So for example, we've got chemical equations for the combustion of methane and glucose down the bottom here. Now the one for glucose is the one that I particularly want you to focus on, because that's what we're going to look at also in respiration next. But you notice there's some common features. We've got a hydrocarbon compound. Glucose does contain oxygen atoms as well, but it's still mostly built around carbon and hydrogen. They're combining with oxygen gas, O2, and we're producing carbon dioxide and water. And then we will produce, depending on the compounds that we're burning, we need different amounts of oxygen, we produce different amounts of carbon dioxide and water, but that's kind of the general principle. And we can see that, generally we talk about things called a fire triangle when we're thinking about combustion. If for a bushfire or a house fire or things like for a campfire, for that fire to be maintained, we need a source of a fuel, something that can burn. We need some oxygen to help that burning process. We need oxygen as one of the reactants. And we also need a source of heat or a source of ignition, a way in which to get the burning process started. We're lighting a match to get a campfire going. We are, using a Bunsen burner to get some heating going. We're, a little spark from a spark plug to light the octane in your petrol. Okay, they get this combustion reaction going. As it is proceeding, we get rid of what we call exhaust, or these gases that are produced, and it also generates a significant amount of heat and light. Okay, so we say that this reaction is highly exothermic. Okay, lots of heat and light energy leaves the system to the surroundings. You sit around a campfire and you notice the difference. It's the kind of energy that's involved in making sure your car engine works. Okay, so it's highly exothermic. The reason combustion reactions keep going is that some of this heat can be channeled into getting some more fuel and oxygen reacting. So it's kind of, we say that it's spontaneous. It keeps this process going. Heat generates some more reaction until either all the fuel or the oxygen is used up, or it cools down enough that we can't sustain it anymore. That's kind of the gist of how we put out a fire, is that we try to eliminate one of these three aspects. We either cause it to run out of fuel, we suffocate it so we reduce the amount of oxygen, or we cool it down so that it doesn't actually keep spontaneously burning. Anyway, so that's kind of a bit about what combustion involves. So what about respiration, or which is short for cellular respiration? We're focusing on a process that happens inside all of your cells. The cells of all living things do this process. Okay, it occurs specifically inside, we're looking at the mitochondria, these little structures, organelles within a cell. Okay, that they're, part of their job there is in order for this energy production. Okay, so respiration is where we're converting chemical potential energy of compounds like carbohydrates and fats to useful energy for the cell. Okay, so it's taking the energy from these compounds and turning it into a form that the cell can use to power the processes it needs to do, whether it's making proteins, whether it's, sending compounds back and forth, it's repairing things, it's, preparing to divide to make new cells, whatever that might be. One of the chemicals that's really relevant here is what's called ATP. Now, we're not going to go into a huge amount of detail about it. It's called adenosine triphosphate, ATP, but it is essentially the cell's energy source. Okay, it's a compound that, it's this, the energy that's involved in this chemical change here is channeled into making this chemical, which can then be used for other things. So, you might want to think about it like money. We're going through this process to help generate this money that then can be taken somewhere else and spent in order for other things to happen. Okay, but you notice that the equation over here is the same as the combustion of glucose that we looked at before. Glucose, which is this compound, reacting with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. And then we've written here this idea of ATP energy as this other thing that this byproduct of this process. Okay, so we're talking the same, what looks like the same chemical reaction, but actually, if you scratch the surface, if we kind of dig a little deeper, we see that's kind of about where the similarity ends between these two processes. So we've got a table here with some of these things. We're going to talk you through it. So that combustion, we look at this idea that we're burning these compounds, these fuels, these things in one chemical step. However, cellular respiration is actually many smaller steps kind of happening in this chain, in this sequence, little bit by little bit. Combustion releases heat and light energy to the surroundings, whereas cellular respiration is actually, part of the main goal is producing ATP. Now, some heat is also lost. That's why when you're using your muscles, your temperature goes up, for example, and so you need to cool down. That some of that energy is lost that way. It's not completely efficient. But the idea is that this ATP is used for other processes inside the cell. Okay, so the goal of these reactions is different. Combustion is one chemical reaction, one step, one process, whereas respiration is a series of them. And when we write that equation for respiration, it's actually summarizing the whole process. It's kind of a combination of all these little micro steps. Combustion is a very fast reaction. Okay, proceeds very quickly and it's very spontaneous, whereas respiration is slower. Combustion is highly exothermic. Lots of this energy is lost to the surroundings because of the process by which it happens, whereas respiration, we want to conserve that energy, that it is only slightly exothermic, that lots of the energy is still conserved because of the processes that we use, or that are carried out through this respiration. So just to recap, combustion, we're talking about a rapid exothermic reaction of carbon compounds with oxygen. Exothermic, it releases lots of energy to the surroundings. Okay, we produce carbon dioxide and water. Respiration, though, is this slow series of chemical reactions inside the cell, creates ATP. So on the surface looks similar, but actually that these two things, that we've got one step versus many steps, fast versus slow, lots of little differences between them. All right, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye for now.